Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 100th episode of LA Rams Central. It is quite the accomplishment that you stuck with me this long, stuck with me and Eric this long. Done some format changes along the way. It's probably a little more than 100 episodes when you throw in the breaking news and the interviews and the things like that, but interview, I should say. But it's been fun. It's been a wild ride, has it not, Eric?
Absolutely, it has. You know what? I'm not going to lie to you guys. I have started following a lot of football guys on Twitter, and anytime there's a Rams breaking news, I'm like, oh, look at that! Like Donald when Aaron Donald finally signed his contract. Let's cue all the relieved LA Ram fans out there, and we'll get into the contract here in a little bit. But
sure,
you know,
of course.
I texted Anthony. I was like, you know, Donald finally got paid. You know, typically if I'm not a Rams fan, and I'm not considering myself a Rams fan, and I'll throw in the word yet on there, but I do follow their news and listen to what they do. And just to let you know, the Rams may be playing some preseason games in Hawaii next year, so if you guys want to take a quick trip out there to see your boys play, hey, what better way to spend a weekend or a few days in Hawaii? But, you know, I find myself, you know, seeing this news and you know, because I got Twitter, and Anthony doesn't love Twitter. He doesn't even like Twitter. So
bunch of trolls.
That's where I get a lot of my breaking news, and I sent it to him, and you know, trying to get his reaction, and I even sent him the breakdown of the Donald contract. So, you know, I find myself doing that, and you know, it's not just for me, it's not just for him, but it's for everybody that listens here. So that's why I've started doing it, and I've been doing it, and you know, I think it's important for everybody to know.
Well, and I'll tell you, I don't need Twitter when I got friends like you and LT. LT had you beat by about 45 seconds. LT from Combat Sports LA sent me a message saying, you know, we got Aaron Donald paid, and I'm like, sweet. So then I went on my NFL Nitwit app and checked out how much it was, and then you sent me the details of the contract, and I was like, yeah, actually, that makes total sense. He gets a dip in pay, and we're going to talk about this later. So let me just wrap this up, and then we'll just jump right into it, because obviously there could be no better news to report on the 100th episode of LA Rams Central than Aaron Donald being locked up as a Ram. So thanks, guys, for sticking with us. Keep the subscriptions coming. Keep the comments coming, and we'll try to answer it to the best of our ability. Now, getting to the Aaron Donald deal. There were a couple things that really drove me crazy during this process. First, from the Rams front, you know, if you have a deal, you have a deal. And I understand, and this is why I don't get too angry and I don't get too upset until I know for sure what's going on. Because the Rams said they had a deal in the works, and then it took forever to get the deal done. It's like, guys, if you had the money set aside, you had the money set aside. But when you actually look at the breakdown of the contract, he takes a dip in pay right about the time Jared Goff's contract comes up. So they structured him in such a way where the Rams will have money budgeted in those years, and it's about a 2-year window where they may have to either franchise tag and then negotiate a deal with Jared Goff, which I thought was pretty amazing. And then, you know, they're sitting there, and I heard one person say, oh, you know, I don't know how the Rams are going to afford this. And it's like, do you look at their budget? Like, it floored me because the Rams are, before this contract was signed by 2020, 2021, they were $120 million under the cap. So it wasn't complicated to figure out that the Rams had the money, and of course then they paid him. So I was pretty excited about that. Now, obviously, with, you know, $47 million around that time, I think it is, or maybe it's 37. I'd have to go back and look at the deal. It'll be a little bit less than that, but they're still going to be in good cap shape. And I have a feeling that Ndamukong Suh would take a contract for lesser money if it meant being a part of something special. They paid him big this go-round, and I think the anticipation is sign a longer-term deal that's more team-friendly and will add more incentive-friendly incentives. So I liked what I saw. The deal itself, you know, this is why I don't get too upset. I learned my lesson last year going off on the Rams GM. And I'm man enough to admit when I'm wrong. And as much as I ripped him up and down for some decisions, and I still stand by the O-line decisions, you can't question Cooper Kupp. You know, you could certainly question Everett at this point, but I think Everett he showed that he has a lot of talent. He just has to fine-tune it. So, you know, time will tell.
Yeah, and it's funny, and like I said, we can break down the Donald contract as far as years ago, but when you said he takes a dip, the Rams have a lot of money actually after this year coming off the books because Sue's only signed for the 1 year. They got their corners who are only a year or two away from free agency as well that they picked up in terms of Aqib Talib and Marcus Peters. So unless they really go and prove their worth even more than what they're getting paid, then the Rams may, offer them a contract extension, or they could just let them walk. So depending on who they also get in the draft,
well, and
if they want to go younger and cheaper, there's that option too. So they have a lot of options on way to go. They don't have a set like we have to go this way. They can go one of 10 different ways if they want.
The corners coming out this year are going to be pretty good. So the Rams are going to have a real choice to make. Do you go younger with the young talent coming in that's somewhat unproven, or do you go with the better? I think they're going to sign Peters and let Talib walk. That's what my gut tells me. Peters is the younger of the two. He's heading into the prime of his career. Talib's at the end of his career. Talib may be willing to take a pay cut and groom a guy. If he isn't and he feels like he wants to go get paid somewhere else, then that's what Talib can do. I do think that Talib is a rental. And I think Marcus Peters is something the Rams are going to keep an eye on and try to work a deal out. And they'll have money next year to sign him. So, like you said, that Sue money comes off the books. They could sign Sue to a lesser deal. There's a whole bunch of things that could happen. But you look at what the Rams did this offseason. They signed their own. They signed Gurley, they signed Donald, and they signed one guy to a contract that no one else seemed to want to sign a contract to. And don't think that doesn't make Braden Cooks want to play that much harder for this organization, because New England didn't want to give him a long-term deal, New Orleans didn't want to give him a long-term deal, and all the guy did was produce. And then he comes into the Rams, he has a couple of good, weeks of practice, and the Rams are like, we need a wide receiver. You haven't been given an opportunity. We're going to give you one. I just think that that's going to go a long way for his enthusiasm and effort on the field, to be sure. So we'll have to wait and see how that goes.
Yeah, and you're going to see a lot of guys who are on one-year deals actually really contribute and produce. If they're in a contract year, they want to get paid. They've seen that the Rams have shelled out some money, and if Peters or Talib or Sue are within that window, then you can expect the Rams, as they welcome them to their home, you can expect them to say, you know what, we appreciate what you've done, and we want you here for another couple of years.
Yeah. Well, they don't move into the home until 2020, so there is that. But
right,
for sure. So Eric, I'm gonna let you take over for a minute. We're gonna do something special here today. Now you're noticing I'm wearing football garb. That's because we're gonna kind of do a preview to Total Football Talk today. But that's at the end. First, we're going to go out with a bang, and LA Rams Central is going to have its 100th and final episode wrap up with something that is near and dear to my heart, which is the all-time Rams roster. Now, I went, Eric, so you know what I did. I went 5 linemen, a backup quarterback with a starter. I went 2 tailbacks and a fullback just because the Rams have so many good running backs. 4 wide receivers and a tight end. And then on defense, I went with a 4-3. I have a nickel and dime DB, a free and strong safety, kicker, punter, kicker, returner, punt returner. So that's kind of how I broke that down. And yeah. So Eric, I don't know how you did it, but we're going to let you do the Bears.
Okay. All right. So we're going to do the Bears first, and we're going to start with the most important position on the field, and that is quarterback. Well, if you guys know any football history, then the quarterback for the Bears hasn't been the most reliable or the most fruitful. Okay, so we're gonna have to go all the way back to what seems like the beginning of time, and the Bears quarterback for the all-time team is Sid Luckman. Now, a lot of his records were broken by Jay Cutler, but as you guys know, I'm not even the remote of a Cutler fan. It pains me to not say Jim McMahon, but he didn't have a lot of healthy years, and he did lead them to a Super Bowl. And you can't take away his gut, on on a football field when the Bears in '85 were trailing in Minnesota, and McMahon wasn't 100%. I mean, I don't think he was ever 100%, but Jim McMahon lobbied Mike Ditka to get back into the game. Finally got back in the game in the second half and led a comeback, and the Bears won. But again, there was a lot of those times where McMahon was hurt, and I think if McMahon stays healthy, the Bears probably win one or two more Super Bowls. But a lot of that also has to do with Bears defensive coordinator Buddy Ryan. If he doesn't leave for Philly, maybe the Bears, keep up with the Super Bowl and beat the Redskins or beat the 49ers, who they seem to never were able to beat in the 80s. But Sid Luckman is my quarterback. Now, as far as running back goes, the Bears have been very fruitful with running backs. And it's really hard to choose one, but it really isn't. So I am going with the number 2 all-time rushing leader in Walter Payton. And just like what I think Anthony's going to do with the Rams, he would take Dickerson over Falk. And obviously, I just like the way Walter ran the football. He actually hit defenders. Defenders didn't hit him. There could be a case made for Red Grange, Galloping Ghost, or there could have been a case made for Gale Sayers. There could have been a case made for Neil Anderson and Matt Forte, but I can't put those running backs in there. I got to go Walter Payton. Now, Walter Payton was usually lined up behind a fullback. And his fullback that was in front of him was Matt Suhey, and I would love to use Matt Suhey here. Matt Suhey was instrumental in Walter getting a lot of holes opened up for him. He was hard-nosed. He didn't mind, taking on the biggest guy and opening up holes for Walter. But you know what? I can't go away from the one fullback that a lot of people know, and he's got one of the greatest names in football, and that is fullback Bronco Nagurski. Now he's old school. He'd pick up a defender, he'd throw him out of the way. It don't matter. He would get him and shoot him out. So Bronco Nagurski is blocking for Walter Payton. I mean, that is a tandem that no defensive lineman want to see at all. Now, wide receiver for the Bears has not always been fruitful. Okay, their leading receiver of all time is probably a guy you've never heard of. His name is Johnny Morris. He leads the Bears, actually, with over 5,000 yards receiving. Now, closing in on that, and of course he's not with the Bears anymore, is Brandon Marshall. Down on the list, you have Curtis Conway, Marty Booker, and Willie Gault. The thing is, wide receiver has never been fruitful for the Bears, okay? So Johnny Morris is going to be the one wide receiver that I use. And then the other wide receiver that I'm going to use is another wide receiver who actually is still technically active today. He's actually on the Seahawks, and he has actually done well in a Bears uniform when he was here. He had a lot of good games with Jay Cutler. And so, again, because the position is not so heavy, I'm going to go with Brandon Marshall. He's tall, the hands are decent, and I took him over guys like Willie Gault. I love Speedy Willie Gault. I think he might have been one of my favorite Bears receiver. He's a Super Bowl champion, but I think Marshall was able to do a little bit more and be better than Willie Gault. And this is over guys like Curtis Conway and Marty Booker, who were instrumental in Bears seasons, but not as much as, all-time leading receiver Johnny Morris and Brandon Marshall. So those are my two wide receivers. My tight end, if Greg Olsen doesn't get traded, he might take over, but because the Bears were dumb enough when they had a former Rams head coach Mike Martz as their offensive coordinator, and he didn't like tight ends, they traded Greg Olsen to the Panthers for basically nothing. So the tight end is none other than Hall of Famer Mike Ditka.
It better be.
Iron Mike.
It better be. I said it better be.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh no, it is. It is Mike Ditka. He was hard-nosed on the football field, both as player and coach, and that's why he's going to line up at tight end. Now, on the line for offensive tackle, I have to go with my man and Super Bowl champion Jimbo Cope. Very underrated.
Oh yeah.
To take on any block. Okay, should be in the Hall of Fame. That's another story for another day. Now, on the other side, it's tough to say. Jimbo Covert stands high above all the rest.
Well, really quick, I want to say something on Jimbo Covert. Did you know from 84 to 86, no blitzes up the middle got to the quarterback? That's an incredible streak. That's a 3-year window where anytime they did stunts or blitzes up the middle, Covert and company shut it down. That's a good pick.
Yeah, Jimbo Covert, he definitely makes the all-time Bears team. Now, partnered along the other tackle spot, I'm going to go with a guy who dominated early 80s. Even before that, before Jimbo Covert came along, and part of the Bears' toughness on the offensive line, again, they're holding it down for Walter Payton, but I'm going to go with two guys, but one's going to be a backup in case anybody gets injured, but it's always good to have a backup. So Ed Healy and George Connor take the other offensive tackle spot. Hard to pick between the two, but they are the grit and toughness of Bears football.
Hey, Eric. I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I want to make a correction. Covert's a tackle. Your center was Hilgenberg, right?
I didn't get to center yet.
I know, but that's who I was talking about as far as not letting blitzes up the middle. That's my bad. Sorry, I gave wrong info. Go ahead.
Okay. So the offensive tackle positions go to Jimbo Covert and then Ed Healy and George Connor. Now we'll go to guard as we're making our way in. There's a very underrated guard who was on the 85 Bears who not only kept to himself, but fed off every other offensive lineman, and that was Mark Bortz. Might not remember the name.
Oh, I know.
But Mark Bortz, he didn't back down from anybody. He just kept going at his own pace, loved every minute of it. And he knew he had backup if he wanted it, from his offensive lineman, but he didn't need it. The other guard position, you can go a number of different ways, but I'm going to go with the offensive guard. Not many people know this name. Probably one of the best guards in the history of Bears football, George Musso.
Ooh.
The guy was a bulldog. He, again, another offensive lineman who wouldn't back down from anybody or anything. He'd run through a brick wall for anybody. Now, going to center. Now, I could go one of two guys, but I'm going with the Super Bowl champion Jay Hilgenberg. I really want to say Olin Kreutz. Olin Kreutz was instrumental in a lot of Bears seasons, getting them to the Super Bowl in 2006, and was one of the best centers the Bears ever had. But I think Hilgenberg was just a hair better, and Jay Hilgenberg is going to center that offensive line.
Well, as I said, he's the one that didn't allow a single blitz up the middle to get to the quarterback from 84 to 86, him and that guard tandem. So that's a heck of an O-line. I guess I'll do the Rams offense next, and then we'll go back to the Bears for D. I'm going to start with the O-line. The Rams have a rich tradition on the offensive line, and probably that's why he's got so many running backs that are in the Hall of Fame. But for me, center, there's only one center that really somebody can put on this list. When you win 7 straight division titles, when you are the anchor to an offensive line and hold the Pittsburgh Steelers to very few pressures in the Super Bowl. And remember, the Rams didn't lose to the Steelers once in the 70s. It wasn't until January of 1980 that the Rams finally lost to Pittsburgh, which technically was a 79 season. So for me, it's Rich Saul. Rich Saul is one of the best offensive linemen that the Rams have ever had. And at guard, it's even easier than that for me at guard, because with the guard position, the Rams had some good ones in the past, but inconsistency until they got Dennis Hara. He was a beast, and he was there forever. Tom Mack was the other center. I mean, the Rams had a 20-year run where these guys were a big part of both of those decades, and you got to put them on the list. And then you've got Papa Bear, Jackie Slater at tackle, there's no way Jackie's not going to be on this list. One of the best offensive linemen in NFL history. And then you have Orlando Pace on the other side. Now, when you look at this Rams offensive line, I don't know if Saul is in the Hall of Fame, but I know Dennis Hara is. I know Jackie Slater is, and I know Orlando Pace is. Mack, I don't think is, and Rich Saul, I don't know if he is or not. He could be. I'm literally 50-50 on Saul being in the Hall. But all 5 of these linemen should be Hall of Famers because of what they contributed and what they did. The quarterback position for me is, you guys know as a Ram fan, it's a thing of pain. Even when we were good, our quarterbacks sometimes were not. So it's really, this was easy. You got Kurt Warner starting. I know that's going to piss off some LA Ram fans, but sorry, guys. This is Ram history here now. And then I got Bob Waterfield as the backup because Bob Waterfield was really good for a good 10-year window and got the Rams a couple of championships in his playing days, which is more than any other Ram quarterback. So you got to say he was the best one, right? Won a championship as a rookie. Him and Sammy Baugh are the only 2 quarterbacks to ever accomplish that. And ironically, he won his championship his rookie year against Sammy Baugh in 45. So definitely got those 2. The running back position is just ridiculous. You know, whether it's spot people like, you know, Jerome Bettis, who was there for a tick, you know, Steven Jackson, who's the all-time Rams leading rusher, you know, whether it's guys that made a short stop but made an impact like Charles White, then you got guys like Wendell Tyler, Lawrence McCutcheon, then you've got, you know, guys that were great when the Rams were terrible and John Arnett and Dick Bass. There's so many great running backs in Ram history. So for me, I went with 2 tailbacks and a fullback. And the 2 best running backs the Rams ever had. And ironically, both have ties to the Colts. Eric Dickerson and Marshall Faulk. I don't know that you can pick anybody other than those 2 at the moment. And then as far as the fullback goes, you got to go with the original, the baby bull of the bull elephant backfield, Tank Younger. Dude was a truck. You couldn't tackle him if you wanted to. You know, he was the type of guy that if you needed 3, he got you 5. If you needed 5, he got you 7. If you needed 10, he got you 11. He was a beast. So I have him there. I'll go tight end next because tight end is another one that's been woeful for the Rams over the years. And the only name that I could really think of that was even worth putting on this list, I wanted to put Pete Houlihan, but not a long enough career in a Ram uniform. So I went with Ernie Conwell. One of the best tight ends the Rams ever had and a Super Bowl champion to boot. So, you know, you got to put him there. Wide receiver, though, Eric, unlike the Bears, this was a difficult position.
I bet it was.
Dude, there's so many good ones. And the names that I left off this list are probably going to tick people off. But if you're asking me, guys that make an impact, guys that played the game the right way, guys that were big-time players in big-time situations, guys who didn't drop the ball when they were wide open, pulling away from a defender in a friggin' divisional playoff game against the Carolina Panthers, won't even get me started on that one, then this is the list, right? I got guys upon guys. Do you know who I'm talking about, by the way?
You could be talking about any number of people.
Who's the one that dropped the ball against...
Hold on. Wait. If you're talking about not dropping the ball...
No, I'm talking about a guy that could be... I'm talking about a guy that could be on this list who did drop the ball.
Oh, Ricky Prohl.
No. Ricky Prohl? Are you on drugs? Torrey Holt.
Sorry, I couldn't pass that one up.
Such a punk. Anyway, Elroy Crazy Legs Hirsch is starting. Tom Fears.
Hirsch was a halfback.
No, he was a flanker.
No.
Yeah.
I'm actually looking at your Hall of Famers right now.
Well, then they mislabeled him. Because I'm looking at this book right here. I'll pull it up.
Okay, because, and I'm telling you this right now, okay, Elroy Crazy Legs Hirsch on the Hall of Fame website was a halfback /end from 46 to 57.
That
might have been Rams years, but that's what they haven't labeled it.
Yeah, well, the end is the key, and end were wide receivers back then, so he played both positions. The Rams running backs, I'm looking.
Who's a halfback?
He was not. Not going to have this argument. Hirsch is a wide receiver. He'd be a wide receiver today. Let's put it that way. Dude was a beast.
Well, he was a white guy, so of course he'd be a wide receiver.
Hey, Christian McCaffrey's white. Yeah, no, the Rams running backs were Towler and Younger, you schmuck. Hirsch was a wide receiver. The NFL is typical. The NFL can't even get the Rams Hall of Famers right. Friggin' idiots. Anyway, Hirsch is a wide receiver. He's number 1. Tom Fears is number 2. Those two were lethal in the 50s. You couldn't cover them.
But I think I know who your number 3 is if you're going 3.
I'm going 4. So,
you're going 4.
Yep. So, number 3 is Isaac Bruce.
Yeah, I figured you'd go with Bruce.
Yeah, Bruce.
I loved Isaac Bruce.
Dude, such a good route runner, such a good dude, and such great hands. And he was
I know who number 4 is. Ooh, Azahir Hakim.
Yeah, no. No. But, one last thing on Bruce. A lot of people don't realize this. His rookie year was 94. So, he was an LA Ram before he was a St. Louis Ram. So, little fun fact. Are you ready for number 4? Guys, don't get angry. Go look at the numbers. He's one of the best wide receivers the Rams ever had. And I've seen enough. Look, I grew up rooting and watching for the guy that you thought was going to be on the list. There's a lot of drop passes at wrong times there. Jack Snow is my 4th wide receiver, hands down. He's one of the best they ever had. So I got Hirsch, Fears, Bruce, and Snow.
Cue up the argument. Stop kidding.
Yeah, right. I know he's a Hall of Famer. He's a great wide receiver, but got to go with that. Anyway, go ahead, Eric. Go to defense.
All right. Well, defense. Now this is where I think the Bears make their all-time franchise history. And you know what? The Rams have a lot of good defenders too. So I'm not taking anything away from the Rams because a lot of great players came up through the Rams. So we're going to start on the end. And, you know, the Bears, Anthony's going to get really mad at me in 3, 2, 1. I'm going with a 4-4 defense for the Bears.
Oh, my God. Are you kidding?
Okay. See, I told you. And this is why. And I will get to it, actually. But on the defensive end, I'm going to have Hall of Famer Richard Dent.
Yeah.
Sorry, there's nobody else that even comes close. Now, what I really want to do is take Julius Peppers on the other end. But he came over to the Bears a little bit older, and I can't put him on there. I would love to use Alex Brown, but he didn't play long enough. So I'm going with another defensive end who is very, very, very underrated on the Bears defense. He doesn't play anymore, but in the early 90s, he wreaked havoc. You know, he made defenses change the way they play. Or I'm sorry, he made opposing offenses change the way they play because of him. And go back and watch if you want, because, you know, they ran away from him. But I'm taking defensive end Trace Armstrong. So you have Dent on one side, Trace Armstrong on the other, and you know what? They can flip-flop because they were that good. Now, in the middle, I have a world of players that I can use. However, there were none tougher, none, not at all, than Dan Hampton and Steve Mongo McMichael. Centers of the Bears 46 defense that you couldn't run through. McMichael, probably one of the underrated defensive tackles in that Bears 85 year. Should be a Hall of Famer, is not, but Hampton is. And Hampton, unfortunately, because the NFL has asked the Bears not to retire any more numbers, do not have number 99 retired, which is a shame because it should be. So Hampton and McMichael. Now, here's why I do the 4-4 defense, because it is so darn difficult to only pick 3 linebackers. In the middle alone is ridiculous. if any of you watch the Hall of Fame ceremony and you listen to Brian Urlacher, and it still gives me chills to this day because of what he said. He said the Bears have the best collection of middle linebackers in NFL history.
I don't disagree with that.
Bill George, Dick Butkus, Mike Singletary, and now himself. You want to play middle linebacker for the Bears? Boy, you should be talking to all those guys in front of you who have been there and played that to see what it's like to play middle linebacker in Chicago.
Yeah.
And I really hope Roquan Smith or Nick Kwiatkowski has called Brian Urlacher and say, hey, what do I need to do as a middle linebacker in Chicago? Because those are the two middle linebackers in Chicago right now. And so this is why for the 4-4 defense.
Okay, that makes sense.
In the middle, you have Singletary and Urlacher. I'm sorry, I can't choose between the two. I love Singletary. What he did on that Bears defense in '85 will never go unnoticed. I think he is the most underrated middle linebacker in Bears history. Next to him, I don't care who calls the plays, but next to him is Brian Urlacher. Urlacher could go out and tackle any running back in the game today. He can go cover any wide receiver in the game as well. Those two right there. On the ends, this is where it gets fun. Because you ain't running inside, you ain't running outside. Dick Butkus on one side, Bill George on the other. I can't narrow it down to three. I just can't. I don't care how good Wilbur Marshall was. I don't care how good Lance Briggs was. None of those guys. I don't care how good Otis Wilson was. None of those guys would overtake any of those four at any point in their careers.
Interesting.
Now for the secondary. And this is where it becomes difficult because I'm going to give a tribute to one person when I get to their position. And again, Anthony might look at me and say, "What are you thinking?" But the first cornerback position, he perfected the peanut punch. I am taking Charles Tillman.
Yeah.
He has been able to cover guys like Calvin Johnson one-on-one, and we all know that covering Calvin Johnson one-on-one is no easy task. So Peanut Tillman gets one quarterback position. The other one is a little bit more difficult because there have been a lot of good corners, not great corners. However, I'm going to take an instrumental secondary player from the 1963 championship team. This is how far back I'm going. He had 27 interceptions. Was Benny McRae.
He was good.
Tillman and McRae on one side would be completely ridiculous. Now we go to safety. And I have my pick from a ton of safeties on the list. I could pick Mark Carrier. I could pick Gary Fensick. And Fensick is probably my number one. Mike Brown is my number two. I love both. I especially love Mike Brown, watching him play. I wish he could stay healthy. He'd probably be number one on the list. I like the old school 85 safety Dave Duerson. But I'm going to go with a harder hitter and the one player who basically was the start of the 46 defense. Do you know who I'm talking about?
One more time?
I'm taking a player who's primarily the start of the 46 defense.
Oh, yeah. I know who you're talking about.
Who?
Oh, what the hell's his name? He was number 46.
That's right. He was number 46.
He got injured.
Yeah, correct. I am taking Doug Plank.
Doug Plank.
As a nod to him.
That's right.
Doug Plank and Gary Fensick formed one of the hardest hitting duos in the 80s, was nicknamed the Hitmen between the two.
Nice.
The style of play that he came with was reckless abandon. A thing you wouldn't see in today's football because he'd be flagged so many times. But you want the ball loose, he'll do it for you. So this is why I went with a 44 defense. We'll get to special teams here in a moment, but now I want to hear the Rams.
Well, do the special teams real quick.
Okay. So, kick returner or punt returner. Okay? Every other punt or kick returner is somebody different. You have two kick returners. On one side you have Gale Sayers, the other side you have Devin Hester. On a punt return, every other punt is fielded by either Hester or Sayers. Sorry, I can't pick between the two. And if there's a game against San Francisco, it's Gale Sayers all day. Because if you remember, if anybody remembers who's a football fan, Gale Sayers had 6 touchdowns in one day against the 49ers.
Yeah, I remember that. Well, I don't remember that. I wasn't alive, but I remember.
Right. You've seen the highlights, is
Yep.
what you mean. Maybe even seen some clips of the game.
Yep.
But that game was played on Wrigley Field as well. So this is how far back we're going. But Sayers was probably one of the best special team guys when he did it all. He played offense, he played special teams, ran back punts, ran back kicks. Devin Hester is probably one of the best and made opposing special teams kick differently when it came to the Bears. In case you want to look at it again, check out the Super Bowl the Bears and Colts played. First kickoff went to Hester. First ever return opening kickoff for a touchdown. After that, all you saw from Vinatieri was squibs down the middle or to the sideline. That was it. They made them field the ball. When the Colts special teams was more than halfway to them. And it worked. It worked. It was very frustrating. And as far as kicker goes, I have 2, but I have to go 1. And as much as I love Robbie Gould, I've never seen this Bear under more cool pressure. And that's the butthead, Kevin Butler. Now, Robbie Gould is the all-time Bears points leader, and that's great. And he came back with San Francisco last year and beat the Bears on 5 field goals. And Chicago always have a special place for Robbie Gould. But Kevin Butler takes the cake. Kevin Butler is one of the best kickers in Bears history. Now, some of you who might know Bears history might say, well, Robbie Gould has a better field goal percentage, which is true. But I like Butler better.
Butler.
As far as punters go, the Bears punters have been relatively quiet. They, you could go a number of ways. But I'm going to go with the only Bears punter to reach the Pro Bowl. His name, he's got 2 first names and 1 colorful last name. His name is Bobby Joe Green.
Interesting.
And I'm only using that as
you just like people. You just like people with 3 names, like Jim Bob Cooter.
I do. So that would be the punter, and then you know what? I'm going to go 1 more, and I'm going to go long snapper. And the best long snapper the Bears have ever had, because your center is typically not your long snapper, okay? And that's Patrick Manley.
Well, you went detailed. I'm not going long snapper. I don't have the first. I guess McDonald in the 80s, maybe.
Well, Patrick Manley was probably one of the better long snappers I've seen the Bears have, and he never had a bad long snap. On a field goal attempt, on an extra point attempt, it was always right there in the middle. And he had a show in Chicago for a while he was on the Bears, and he even talked about how difficult it was to long snap, especially in Chicago weather. When the ball was frozen, the ball was slick. But I'm going to give a shout-out to Patrick Manley. He played for the Bears a long time, and he played over 240 games with the Bears. And, in football terms, that's not a lot. I mean, some Hall of Fame quarterbacks who stick with their one team for that long, get that far. But, he was the longest tenured Chicago Bear for a long time. So, a shout out to Patrick Manley. Patrick Manley is the Bears long snapper.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. this is probably, for me and you, Eric, the worst side of the ball to have to do an all-time team with.
Absolutely.
So there are so many great Rams on this side of the ball. I don't even know how you do. I mean, somebody could be like, "I have a problem with your list," and I'd be like, "Yeah, I agree." Like, I don't know what to tell you. There's so many good players, but I'm gonna go simple. The all-time NFL sack leader is Deacon Jones, and I will stand by that until they decide to go back and actually count the times he actually had sacks. In one year, he had 26. The following year, he had 23. And the following year after that, he had 25. And yet, they're not recognized because they didn't keep track of them. Like, they're incapable of going back into time, watching the film, tallying up the sacks, and adding it to the record books. Apparently, that's too much to ask. You know, you create a new category, and then you don't utilize it. Whatever. So, Deacon Jones, the all-time NFL sack leader.
Hold on, Anthony. Hold on. Now, I get, okay, when they started counting sacks and they don't go back, okay? Unfortunately, and I'm sorry to rain on a little bit of the this Rams parade, but they do this in baseball too, okay? They're the new stat that they have. Well, it's not really new. It's been around for about 5 to 8 years, but they talk about WAR, which is wins above replacement. And they go back to 1903 for Ty Cobb, and they do Babe Ruth in 1927. It's like, but these stats, you know, this didn't exist back then. Who cares what their WAR was? Who cares? I've had arguments with people about the 1987 NL MVP, which was Andre Dawson. He had a 323 on-base percentage. Nobody cared about on-base percentage back then.
Yeah.
And it's with these advanced stats. And I'm not saying stats are advanced because it's not an analytical stat.
No, but let me just say this.
It's the same thing.
Here's why it is the same thing. He's the one that coined the term. He invented the term sack. He kept track of it in his own record, in his own notebook, you know, for film study. And it became so popular, this term that he was using and his way of getting to the quarterback, that people then decided to make it into a category. So I'm not asking you to go back to 1920 or 1922, but Jiminy Christmas, if you're going to even call it sack, which is what he named it, the least you can do is go back to his era and start it there. Because you're right, but where it's different is he was using the term. He was keeping track of that stats. Other defenders around the league were keeping track of that stat. Just the NFL as a league wasn't keeping track of the stat. That's the difference.
Yeah, I get it, but the league then has to determine, okay, if quote unquote sacking the quarterback is now a stat, we have to find a time to start using. We can't go back when you might have been putting it in your own books, okay? Because who knows? Now we got to go rewatch every game, and they might have they could have done that. They could have been like, okay, we're gonna go back to before you started your career, and they're gonna go back maybe 10 years prior to that and do that. But they have to come up with a time to say, okay, well now stats is a statistical category that we're going to count, and let's start doing that beginning with such and such season. So I get it. If Deacon Jones had that, you know, that's all fine and dandy. But and we can say it's not official. Fine, great, but let's recognize for the play he did, which is getting to the quarterback, which was his job.
Yeah, I mean, I guess. I just, like I said, I mean, when did they start keeping track of sacks? 1980?
Oh, that's a good question. Keep going and I'll let you know.
Yeah. All right. Okay, let me go over this. So Aaron Donald is my defensive tackle. I'm sorry, but there's no other choice. Merlin Olsen is my other defensive tackle, and Jack Youngblood is my other defensive end. Those are all...
Dude, the stories on Jack Youngblood is ridiculous. Playing with a broken leg.
I know. And going to the Super Bowl on it and playing a pretty good game with it. In fact, he had one of the hurries that caused an interception late in the game. So the dude was ridiculous. You can't question that one. Linebacker for the Rams is a land of misfit toys. There's some good players. Would I consider great over the years? No. Would I consider really good? Yes. There's a handful of great, but at outside linebacker, I've got Kevin Green. The guy was a sack artist. He was a great defensive player. Then you have the tackling machine in the middle at London Fletcher. The guy was just an intricate part of the Rams' linebacking core in the early aughts and late 90s. Even when the Rams were bad, he was racking up tackles. And then for me, because I couldn't really think of another outside linebacker that did the things that, I thought about what you talked about earlier, and it's funny that you brought that up because that's what I was thinking of. But I was thinking in terms of who's somebody that can cover, a wide receiver, a tight end, a running back out of the backfield, and hit so bad that when you got the ball, you avoided that side of the ball or that side of the field. And so for me, he won several Super Bowls, just not with the Rams. I picked Roman Pfeiffer. So he ended up going to New England and winning a few Super Bowls there. The secondary, pretty easy for the first one. Dick Night Train Lane had 14 picks in one season. He's the best DB, one of the best DBs that ever lived. I know he went to...
Let me ask you this question really quick on Night Train. Wasn't he... Didn't Nick Moore was named the Cardinals or Lions?
No. The 14 interception year was with the Rams. His first 4 years in the league were with the Rams, and he was. His hitting, his hands, his coverage ability all took root and shape with the Rams, and then the Rams decided to get rid of all their good players because they were smart, and Dick Night Train Lane was one of them. So
yeah, every time I see anything on Dick Night Train Lane, it's typically with the other two teams. Like, I don't hear much about him with the Rams except for his first season. Okay, but I was just curious of your thoughts on that. And
well, it's par for the course, Eric. Anytime a Ram does something great, they refuse to talk about it, unless it's so over the top big. I'm hoping that changes now, but I don't know if it was because the Rams had a female owner, and a lot of the people in football tend to be, and this is me saying this, so this is saying something, but a lot of people in football tend to be misogynistic, and I don't think they liked the fact that Georgia Frontiere was the owner, and I think that they, because of that, decided to whitewash a lot of the Rams' history, and made it painstakingly obvious, at least, that they didn't give a frick about the Rams over the time that she was with them. So, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah.
The other corners are a little more modern. Jerry Gray, in my opinion, the guy is the only Ram to go to 4 consecutive Pro Bowls. He even won a Pro Bowl MVP one year. He led the team in interceptions for all 4 of those years. He was a guy the Rams didn't want to let go. They tried playing the Plan B free agent wire game, and it bit him in the butt. They put him on Plan B so they could bring him back and restructure his deal, but the Oilers signed him before they could bring him back because you have to be on the wire for 24 hours. The Rams took a chance and lost him, and Georgia Frontiere actually cried when the Oilers sent in the paperwork, when she found out that the Oilers sent in the paperwork, because that was not the intention. And, so he's one, as far as hitting, as far as makeup speed, as far as causing turnovers, whether it interceptions or fumbles, there was no one better in a Ram uniform. His replacement...
Plus, let's not forget, he was probably the most consistent at shutting down the best wide receiver of all time.
Oh, yeah. Jerry Rice hated going against him. Rice had his moments, but he also had far less moments against the Rams when he was in covering them than anybody else. So, yeah, that's 100% right. So I think that alone is worthy of putting him on the list, just the era that he played in. Then you've got Todd Light, his replacement, and Todd Light was probably better than anybody I've ever seen at studying film and knowing the routes of the offensive player as well as he did. I don't think anybody did it better. So Todd Light was a really good corner for the Rams for a long time. And then I got somebody from the 70s, Rod Perry. There's a lot of good corners in the 70s for the Rams, but I wouldn't call many of them great. But Rod Perry was definitely one of them. Rod Perry was the one guy that didn't screw up the coverage against the Pittsburgh Steelers in the Super Bowl. Unfortunately, I can't say the same for Pat Thomas, but I digress. At safety, it's Keith Lyle and Nolan Cromwell. Those guys were intricate parts of the Rams. They were both leaders, and they were turnover machines as well. So I've got a pretty loaded secondary with guys that know how to pick off the ball and hit with like a ton of bricks. I went real modern here. Greg Zuerlein is my kicker. That wasn't an easy choice to put over Mike Lansford. It really wasn't. But Mike Lansford, huh?
Or Jeff Wilkins?
Oh. Okay, I changed my pick. I forgot. I totally spaced. Jeff Wilkins is my kicker. Never mind. Sorry. I got to change that. Good call. I don't know why I spaced on that name. Yeah, Jeff Wilkins. Jeff Wilkins was one of the most clutch kickers we've ever had. I like Zuerlein's distance, but his accuracy needs to continue to improve, and it will. But, yeah, Jeff Wilkins. Thank you for catching that. I totally spaced on that.
That's what I'm here for.
Amen, brother. Johnny Hekker, the punter. There's no other choice. The Rams punters have been okay at best over the years. There's been a couple like Tahani Jones that have been impressive for times, but nothing like we've seen with Johnny Hekker. And then kicker.
Johnny Hekker was the Rams MVP like 2 years ago before they started getting all this talent, and I think he goes quite a bit unnoticed now.
Yeah,
because he doesn't punt as much.
No, it's great, but when he does punt, I'll never forget the punt against the Jets, where he was punting from his own 2 and he punted it over 90 yards or over 75 yards and completely flipped the field, and it gave the Rams an opportunity to get back into field goal range, and they ended up winning the game because of it. So, he's unbelievable. Kick returner, punt returner. The Rams haven't had many here, so Oz Hakeem and Tony Horn, like those are the best that we had. So those are the 2 that I'm putting back there to return kicks. Gives me a little depth at wide receiver too if I need it. So, but they're not wide receivers; they're specialty players. So there you have it. That's my Ram lineup.
Let me get you that quarterback sack information. The NFL began keeping track of times quarterbacks lost yardage in 61. The sack didn't become official until 82, and according to Pro Football Researchers Association, John Turney, who's a researcher, estimated that Deacon Jones recorded about 173.5 sacks in his career.
He would disagree.
Yeah, Jones might disagree. But I'm not saying like Turney may have gone and watched every Ram game back then to calculate it up, but that's I'm not saying that's official, but that's estimated. That's why I said estimated.
Yeah, we'll see.
Anyway, Deacon Jones was a beast, and any offensive lineman outside of the Bears line that I mentioned would have a tough time with him.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question. Let's throw one extra thing out there before we jump to college. Who's your head coach?
Oh, Ditka, easily.
Yeah? It's not so easy for the Rams.
I mean, okay, you have the founder, Halas. You have Ditka. I grew up with Ditka. Halas did a lot of good for football. Do you think Ditka would be okay being assistant?
Yeah, I think he would. Under Halas, for sure.
Yeah, head coach, Papa Bear, and then assistant Mike Ditka. You can't twist my arm on that one. I said Ditka really quick because, like I said, I grew up with him. He was part of my childhood as far as watching the Bears, and I mean, the only head coach in Bears history to win a Super Bowl. You know, Halas has a lot of championships, but Ditka really epitomized Bears football in the 80s.
Well, he did, for sure. I don't know. For the Rams, it's tough. I don't know I guess you could go Chuck Knox or George Allen. I don't know. I don't know. That's a really tough one. So I don't know. I would say Chuck Knox right now, just because I don't think he got a fair shake when he was with the Rams. They let him go when he was winning all kinds of games, and it was easily one of the most frustrating but best runs in Ram history that we ever had. So I'd probably go that route. All right, Eric, really quick, college football. We're going to switch gears. Your top 4 teams that you follow in college football and why?
Top 4 teams. Number 1, I followed them ever since I was a little kid. What I'm about to say, I might get laughed at, but that's okay. I didn't have cable as a kid. And so what was on every day on NBC every Saturday? But Notre Dame. Watched Notre Dame a lot growing up. I'm going to throw back to the past, but I remember quarterbacks, Rick Meyer, Ron Powlus. That's how far back that goes. And Anthony, you can probably attest to that when you get to yours. But I watched some really good Notre Dame teams. I watched some really poop Notre Dame teams. They're always on. And that's who I liked, and I started liking until I attended Arizona State University, which I'm a Sun Devil for life now. So I love Arizona State. ASU and Notre Dame have played twice in the last 5 years. And I will tell you that alma mater trumps growing up rooting for your favorite college football team. I don't think that, the further away you get from graduation, it loses any of its luster. But if ASU and Notre Dame ever play again, it's ASU all day, every day. The third team, I jumped on this team's bandwagon and have been a fan ever since, but for some reason back in it was just after graduation where I really started following Boise State. I love the blue Smurf turf, and I loved Kellen Moore when he was there. When they were big underdogs to Oklahoma, Ian Johnson taking the Statue of Liberty play into the end zone and then proposing to his girlfriend. I love Boise State. They play with a lot of grit. They play with a lot of heart. You can't teach that. You have to have that in you already. And my number 4 team, it's difficult only because, I watch a lot of college football. I try to keep up with some of the top teams. I don't have a number 14 per se. It's mainly who I want to watch on any given Saturday. And that could be when they were good back when they were playing Ohio State for a national championship. When I watched, I believe, Willis McGahee completely get his knee destroyed. But I watched a lot of Miami games. I watched a lot of Florida games with Tebow. It was painful when Chris Leak was the quarterback, but I kind of stuck through it, kind of watching them as they went on their run with former head coach Urban Meyer. I watched a lot of Oregon Ducks games. I might be the only one east of the Mississippi who likes the different combinations of uniforms. But I also like to watch a lot of Pac-12 games as well. Anytime USC is on, anytime Washington's on. And I'm going to watch the Washington-Auburn game as well, along with the Arizona State UTSA game. But because I'm also in Big Ten country, I get a lot of Michigan State, Ohio State, Wisconsin, Northwestern, Purdue. And, I'll always root for the hometown team. So I guess you could say that. Like, if Illinois is playing, I'll root for them to win. Northwestern played on Thursday. I rooted for them to win, and they beat Purdue 31-27. They have a running back named Larkin who had a really good game. And, Pat Fitzgerald was the head coach. He was instrumental on that 95 Rose Bowl team. And so, they're close, they're local. And I root for them anytime they play a big time team. So they're going to be playing Notre Dame this year, which I'm going to obviously be rooting for Notre Dame because I don't really have ties to Northwestern. Only that they're about an hour from me or less. They play Michigan or Michigan State or Ohio State. I'm rooting for Northwestern. Come to Ryan Field, and even if they go to the Horseshoe or the Big House or Michigan State, I'm watching Northwestern and I'm hoping that they win. I want them to do well. I want them. There's a lot of billboards around Chicago, and a lot of them say Northwestern, Chicago's Big Ten team, which, well, they're Chicago's only Big Ten team, but it's nice to have somebody local, and I don't have to root for a team that's 2.5 hours away or go there, or Indiana or Purdue or something. But they're tough. They have a tough stretch of games coming up, and they're scheduled to be decent this year. They're going to try to win the Big Ten West, and maybe they'll get to a really good bowl game. But they're a tough school to recruit for because a lot of the admissions process, like Notre Dame, it makes for guys who they might want to get, they might not be able to get because of that.
Yeah.
So I guess if you could say my fourth team right now would be Northwestern, but again, I have no ties to the school.
Well, mine is not as detailed. It's pretty simple. I grew up in Arizona most of my life, so the Sun Devils have always been a team that I've followed. I'm not a fan of the uniform change, so they've kind of dropped from like 2 down to 4. So I'll start with them at 4. Tied with them at 4 is Navy. I've always liked Navy. I like the fact that they always seem to win 9-10 games a year despite not having the best athletes. They have tough son of a guns. There's no question about that. But, they don't have the athletes like a Florida State or a Michigan or, an Alabama. But they still go out there, they compete, and they compete hard, and they win a lot of games that you're like, Navy won that one, huh? And it's a lot to do with their system. So, those two for me are kind of tied at 4. Moving up, I would say Maine, my home state where I was born, but I don't really count them, so I'm not putting them in this category because Maine is a Division 3 or 2 school, whatever it is. So I'm not counting Maine. But they're definitely a team that I follow. So I will be giving D2 a little bit of love this year. Who would be 3? That's a tough one. It's going to confuse people. It's probably going to anger some people. But oh man. I don't know. I guess Navy would be 3. If I'm going to be perfectly honest, I'll put Navy at 3, ASU at 4. My number 2 team is also my number 1 team, and my number 1 team is also my number 2 team. I can't decide.
People, please brace yourself.
I tell people all the time, I root for the Alabama Fighting Irish or the Notre Dame Crimson Tide. I can't pick. I can't. I've never been able to as long as I've been alive. So why Notre Dame? Let's start with them. Well, Notre Dame because my father was a Notre Dame fan. I'm Catholic. I almost feel like that's an obligation when you're Catholic. But just the tradition, the history, all of the great players that came in through Notre Dame, all of the great coaches and the atmosphere. And then they went ahead and took a wet diarrhea dump all over the field by putting field turf in and removing the grass. That's reason enough to fire Brian Kelly. But the tradition there is just amazing, and it can't go unnoticed. Alabama's a little more personal. 1992, January of 1992. Watching the football game between Alabama and Miami. And I remember thinking, I like these guys' uniforms. They're simple, but they're awesome, meaning the Alabama team. And I loved Antonio Langham. Watched a few Alabama games over the course of the year and thought he was like, him and David Palmer were like my 2 favorite people. And then I liked their quarterback, Jay Barker as well. So I'm like, oh, this is a pretty cool team. So when they got to the championship, I was kind of rooting for him. And I'll never forget that Gino Torretta, because of the noise, the crowd was yelling, "Go Bama, roll Tide, go Bama, roll Tide," stepped out and did the whole I can't hear because of the crowd thing. and did this like 2 or 3 times, and then finally the ref was like, you just need to get under center. And I remember telling my dad, watch, he's going to throw a pick 6 and this stadium's going to implode. And I kid you not, Gino Torretta drops back, looks to his right, throws Antonio Langham, pick 6. Ball game over, building over. Alabama's the champions, and it's only the third quarter. I mean, it was amazing to hear that crowd, to see that energy.
If I remember this game correctly, it was played in New Orleans at the Sugar Bowl.
Yep.
And there were 95% Bama fans.
Yep.
I remember going to YouTube, actually, going to watch this, because you talked about it so many times. I'm like, okay, I gotta go see it. And yeah, it's ridiculous that one half of the stadium go Bama, the other half roll Tide. And I mean, it's great in unison too.
Oh, it gives me the chills just thinking about it.
Yeah. If you've never heard of YouTube the 1992 Sugar Bowl or National Championship game, because they always move to a different location between the 4 bowls when actually college football didn't have so many bowl games.
Yeah.
But it's so great just listening in unison, because Alabama is not too far away from New Orleans, or it's actually closer to New Orleans than obviously Miami is. But it just, I don't know why, like, Miami fans just didn't go.
Well, I think Miami fans, at that time they were pretty arrogant. They've kind of calmed their jets a little bit now. They've gotten their teeth kicked in over the years, but they thought they were the best team that ever lived in college football, and that they were, they didn't need to go watch because they just knew their boys were going to win. Well, their boys got their teeth kicked in. I think it was 34-13 or something ridiculous. But I just remember it was that moment that not only sucked me into football entirely, and I was already into football, but it got me into college football. And I was just like, this is the best thing ever. So, yeah, I was pretty pumped about that whole situation when that unfolded. So, yeah, I mean, that's why I kind of root for those teams. Now, Notre Dame, just so you guys know, I also kind of like and root for Michigan. Don't judge. Okay, judge. It's stupid, I know, but think. Okay, my wife just said I'm fired. Look, it's simple. I'm a Rams fan. They look like the Rams, right? I mean, they got the thing on the helmet. They got the jerseys. It's all related.
You're fired.
Yeah, because Colorado State doesn't look more like the Rams.
Well, they got different colors. Shut up.
Because a Ram and Wolverine are really close.
A Wolverine would eat a Ram.
I don't want to hear this right now. Anyway, so I just yeah, so that's kind of that, and we're gonna go over. I'm really excited about today's game, guys. A little bit of tradition coming back. Notre Dame, Michigan. I can't wait to watch it. It's going to be a phenomenal game. But we've gone over here pretty long. So, Eric, is there anything you want to wrap up?
Stay tuned for episode 1 of Total Football Talk. We'll be doing both NFL and then a separate college show. So hopefully you guys are excited for that. I mean, if you don't want to get involved in the college show, that's cool. If you know somebody who wants to listen to a really good college show, let them know, and they can subscribe.
Yeah, so
we're definitely going to be keeping the NFL talk going, though.
Yeah, we've made that decision, and I do want to reiterate, although this is the last LA Rams Central show, Total Football Talk is really what we've been doing. While we have a Ram and Bear flavor, to be sure, we do cover everyone, and I've got fans from all over the league that watch this show. I got a Saints fan that watches it, a Vikings fan that watches it, a Jaguar fan that watches us. So we really already are doing it. And to me, it just makes the most sense to change the format slightly and become Total Football Talk, because that's really what we do and what we are. So, guys, I hope you love it. I hope you stay tuned to it. It's been great. 100 episodes, that's quite an accomplishment. And now we're moving into a new era of the show, and we are working on improving the audio quality and some other things that have been raising concerns. I got some things that I'm looking into, and a student that might be able to help me, so we'll see how that goes. Anyway, that's all. Have a good one, and go Rams!